Welcome back to Radio Free Butte Hold. I'm your host, bloodydoves, and today I'm taking a stand and I'm throwing some stones. There's a trend I've been seeing growing in the Battletech community recently, and I have to say something about it because I gotta say something about it. And it's right there in the title. Battletech is not a tournament game. And we're gonna unpack that very loaded statement, because there's a lot going on in that statement. We're gonna unpack that today. And I'm gonna make the case that when you're playing a game, you should focus on what that game is good at and not what that game is bad at. We're going to grade Battletech on some points that I think make an important tournament game, and we're going to see how Battletech does. And I'm going to make this case for you that Battletech is not a good game for tournament play. Before we get into that, though, and we really make some folks angry, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel out. I really appreciate it. And get on down to the comments to tell me why I'm 100% correct or 1,000% wrong. I love to have the debate in the comments. It actually makes my day. I read every comment. So go on, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And now, let's get into it. Strap in, folks. It's gonna get rocky. So, Battletech and tournaments. Battletech is an old game. Battletech is almost 40 years old, and it has seen a lot of rule sets added to the game in that time. Some of them are weird and obscure, like Aerospace 2 or Battle Troops. Some of them are, the classic Battletech that is kind of what the game is known for. And some of them are fast-playing, like Battle Force and its successor, Alpha Strike. Battletech is also a very idiosyncratic game, and it's a relic of an earlier time in a lot of ways, for a couple reasons. One of them is that Battletech, unlike almost every tabletop wargame I can think of still in active production today, has never gone through a severe rules rebuild. The rules in Battletech today are what the rules in Battletech were 30 years ago. You could pick up a rulebook from the late 80s that had the core rules for Battletech, and you could play a game of classic Battletech right now. Very little has changed. There's some stuff around the edges. They changed some line of sight rules. But for the most part, it's pretty easy and it's pretty similar. The core resolution mechanic has never changed. I don't think the hit tables have really ever changed. The record sheets are the same. The core combat mechanic is the same. The weapons are all the same. None of the weapon stats have changed since they were introduced. Except for possibly one. But for the most part, an AC5 back when the game was introduced and an AC5 now have the exact same stats. The same range brackets, the same damage, the same weight, the same crits. It's all the same. This is a very important point. We'll come back to this point. Battletech does have some faster rule sets, such as Alpha Strike, to play large-scale engagements very, very quickly, which is nice. I will say that Alpha Strike is actually a good thing for this aspect of play, because Alpha Strike is quick. We'll talk more about that later. However, speed alone does not make a good tournament game. And I guess we should talk about that. What does make a good tournament game? And in my mind, there are 5 pillars. The first pillar is speed of play. Tournaments are run on a clock because you don't have 8 million years for everyone to sit in the same room and talk about it. You kind of have to get everyone in and out in a set period of time because you only have so many hours in the day to play tournaments together with all the 30 people you get in the room, right? So speed of play is really important. Most tournaments I've ever played in every game I've played, are between an hour, maybe an hour and a half long for each round of the tournament. So you've got to be able to get a full game in an hour. Anyone who's played Classic Battletech can tell you that unless you're playing a 1v1, you ain't getting a game of Classic Battletech done in an hour. The game's too slow for it. Luckily, Alpha Strike is quicker. This is good. The second core pillar is depth of available units and strategies. Being able to approach the game in a variety of ways and have a lot of tactical choices available to players is valuable. It keeps the game from becoming solved and boring. Having a lot of options and making sure they're all viable options is actually a really good thing. The third pillar is constant and consistent balance management. Tournament games, by their nature, require active balancing efforts by the authority that manages the game. Overpowered tactics will be discovered. Designers are human, they will make mistakes. And overpowered tactics will be put into the game with new supplements. And as they're discovered and exploited by players in tournaments, efforts should be taken by the company that makes the game to mitigate or change that, to say, okay, we made a mistake here, we've now been alerted to the mistake, we're going to adjust the rules so this is no longer broken and instead works in the intended way. This kind of active balance management keeps tournament-style games healthy and keeps the environment fresh and, vital. rather than it becoming a morass of overpowered tactics crushing everything else. The fourth big pillar is player skill being the chief determinant of victory. Tournament games, by their nature, are PvP. They are competitive. And a big part of winning a competition is winning through your action. Your skill being the victor. I won because I'm good. Not because my force is overpowered. I won because I have the power to achieve victory, because my skill mattered. That's a core aspect of tournament games. Anyone who's ever played a game competitively can tell you that it feels good, and it's better when you win because you were good, not because your tech was better. And then finally, the fifth pillar is consistent and simple force construction tools. Being able to put a force together for a tournament game should be quick and easy and require minimal effort on the player's end. You should be able to do it with a single centralized tool or a single official source and go, this is the one source of truth for building forces for this game. For example, in Warhammer 40,000, it's the army books. If you want to build a Necron army, you buy that edition's Necron book. It has all your units, what they do, as the list of your units, all their mechanics, all their abilities, the point value for taking them, any optional rules associated with them. It's all there in one book. You just need that book and the core rulebook, and congratulations, you can play 40k. That's really valuable. It's easy. It's an easy on-ramp for players to get into your game. This is important. These are the 5 pillars. In my opinion, Battletech fails on the majority of these. Because Battletech fails on most of these, I say it is a bad game for playing in a competitive tournament environment. Today, I'm going to go through all 5 points in detail and say the ones it succeeds on, the ones it fails on, and why. And then we're going to draw some conclusions at the end. So let's start with the first one. And this is the one that Battletech, I think, unironically excels at, and it's speed of play. I alluded to it earlier, but it's because of Alpha Strike. I don't particularly like Alpha Strike as a system. I think it gives up too much for what it gains, but it is very fast. It is legitimately a fast-playing game. Alpha Strike plays very quickly, and you can get through big games, relatively big games, relatively fast. There's no other points here. That's just what it does. I do think Alpha Strike gives up a lot. I think it loses a lot of the charm of what makes Battletech kind of an interesting system. But if all you want is speed, Alpha Strike has it. Alpha Strike is very swingy, and we'll talk about that later. But Alpha Strike is very, very quick. And I like that. If you want to go fast, Alpha Strike is for you. Notably, it's worth a note here that Alpha Strike was not part of Battletech's original design. It was added a lot later. I believe Alpha Strike was added first by Catalyst Game Labs in 2013. That's the earliest reference I could find to it, and that's the date of the Alpha Strike book that I actually own. It may have come out, it may have been alluded to earlier than that, but I'm not really sure. I know it was built on Battle Force 2 rules, which I think date to the 90s, though I couldn't actually find a precise year on that. If anyone knows exactly when Battle Force 2 was released for the first time, please let me know. Also, was there a Battle Force 1? I assume there was. Let me know about that too. I don't know much about Battle Force. I couldn't find the rules for it easily. So that one's outside my knowledge. But Alpha Strike, I think, was 2013. Which means that classic Battletech was not made with Alpha Strike in mind. This is important. We'll come back to it later. Final grade for speed of play is an A for Alpha Strike is fast playing. Battletech gets a good grade here. It just does. Second category we're going to talk about is depth of units and strategies. So in my mind, Battletech gets a passing grade on this as well. Not a great grade, but a passing grade. Because Battletech is primarily a simulationist historical war game, much of Battletech's depth of units comes in different unit types, not different unit skills. So Battletech has a lot of types of units: infantry, combat vehicles, VTOLs, aerospace fighters, Blackwater Navy, Blue Water Navy, battle mechs, wing-in ground effect vehicles, all kinds of stuff. Dropships, warships, the whole 9 yards. Space stations. Because of this, individual unit types don't have that much tactical flexibility. Infantry, like traditional field infantry, kind of doesn't do a lot, because it's just dudes with rifles in a field. And Battletech kind of respects the fact that dudes with rifles in a field just aren't that tactically relevant, but you can use them if you want. And a lot of the complexity to Battletech's gameplay comes from things like positioning and movement and using the right unit type for a situation. Even mechs don't have that many abilities available to them. They kind of have shoot the bad guy. Now, they have a lot of flavors of shoot the bad guy, and this is where Battletech gets that passing grade. There are so many different flavors of shoot the bad guy, and there are so many different units that you can do it with, that you can actually make some options. You can do a full C3 force. You can do a primarily jumping brawler team. You can do wall of steel strats where you just kind of march forward as a blob of armor with guns and sort of decimate everything in your path. You can go fast flankers. You can go, close-up brawlers. You got some choices. And there's a lot of mechs to do it with, right? And I will say, if your tournament permits infantry or combat vehicles or VTOLs or battle armor, your options do open up a lot. Getting things like battle armor that have a lot more special rules to them, and being able to swarm mechs and do anti-mech attacks with infantry, having some unit types with some special rules to them does open up things a lot. Is that everyone? No, but it's an option, and it's an option worth having. Because of this, I give Battletech a B- here. Final grade B-, you get options, but there's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of asterisks here. There's a lot of, well, yes, but. But it's still a passing grade. A B- still passes. And now we get to the big one. Constant and consistent balance management. And there's no two ways around it. Battletech fucking fails. It gets a big fat F. Spoilers for on the grade. It gets a big fat F because Battletech is an inherently and intentionally unbalanced game. Because of this fact, and this fact alone, even if it didn't fail other points, which it does, Battletech cannot be an effective tournament game because the balancing just doesn't permit it. Because there is no balancing. Battletech is unbalanced. There's not enough options that are all viable enough to make the gameplay effective. And the easiest way to look at this is to look at the difference between Inner Sphere Tech and Clan Tech. And to ask yourself, in a really objective sense, if your goal is victory, not fluff, but if your goal is to win, would you ever take Inner Sphere Technology? And the answer is no. Of course you wouldn't. You would always take Clan Tech. Because Clan Tech is objectively better in virtually every way. And there's just there's no debate to it. Clan Tech is just better. Why would you take any Inner Sphere Heavy Mech over a Timberwolf? And the answer is that you don't. You take the Timberwolf because the Timberwolf is better. And that's just how it is. The Timberwolf is just the superior design. It's faster, it's better armored, or better as well armored, it's better armed, it does way more damage. It's just a better mech. It's just better in every way. Battletech is not a balanced game. When I say that Battletech is intentionally unbalanced, I do mean it. Things like the basic autocannons are not balancing against later options, and they're not supposed to be. If you think the AC-2 is balanced, you are deluding yourself. The gun is crap, and you better be okay with that fact. And the reason for this is Battletech is a simulationist historical war game. And it turns out, because it's historical, history wasn't balanced. History's not supposed to be balanced. The 3025 Capellans were vastly overmatched by House Davion in the Fourth Succession War. And if you look at their force lists, it really shows. The Capellan force list is scraping the bottom of the barrel and fielding, bugs and urban mechs and shit. And the Davions are fielding good mechs. They're fielding actually good quality designs, and the Capellans are fielding, literally anything they can get their hands on, and fielding actual trash. Because it turns out that history wasn't balanced, and it's not supposed to be balanced. Battletech is designed for scenario play with a game master designing the scenario and determining how to even out these imbalances on behalf of their players to keep the game engaging and fun. Whereas tournament games need their design to have active balancing taking place to ensure that most available options are at minimum viable options to prevent players from trapping themselves into unwinnable situations before gameplay even starts. There needs to be an active effort in tournament games to look at the game objectively and go, this option is too powerful or this option is too weak, and to bring them into some level of equilibrium. That's important for competitive games for a million reasons, and anyone who's ever played anything competitively can tell you that having some semblance of balance is important. It keeps the game feeling fair. It means that if your game is balanced, then player skill matters. If your game is unbalanced, then player skill doesn't matter. Because player skill is not the prime determinant of victory anymore. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Because the game is unbalanced, your tech can win the game for you before you even show up. And that's not good. That's not a good thing. Because Battletech is not a balanced game, and because it's never intentionally rebalanced anything, this is just a core problem with the game. And for Battletech, balance doesn't really matter. Because it's not important. Battletech doesn't really care. I cannot emphasize this enough, and I will emphasize it even more, is that there are units in Battletech that are objectively superior to other units, and there's units in Battletech that are objectively garbage. It's because they serve other roles, and they're not meant for playing in a competitive tournament environment, because no units in Battletech were designed with that in mind. You can take units that serve strategic roles, like the Assassin. You can take units that are flavor-focused. You can take units that are doing something weird, like Arena Mechs from Solaris 7, and even the Arena Mechs, for the record, which you could maybe make an argument are meant for competition, are not balanced at all. If you look at the Arena Mechs, and I think Tiro 3055, they are hilariously wacky, and most of them are garbage. The Aqua Gladius is terrible. I love the Aqua Gladius, but it's terrible. So, it's not a balanced game. Because it doesn't do balance changes, and because it has a long-standing policy against adjusting stats, it can't be a tournament game because it lacks one of these key pillars, and it's one of, I think, the most important pillars to a competitive game. So the final grade, as said above, is F for failure. Battletech fails here. And this segues into the next point, which is player skill being the prime determinant of victory. Battletech fails here because of two reasons. One, the tech is unbalanced and can win or lose the game for you. If you show up with clan tech and I show up with 30-50 upgrades on my Inner Sphere mechs, I'm going to get stomped. And it's not going to be very fun, and my skill doesn't really matter. Unless the other problem with player skill being the determinant comes into play, and that's luck. Battletech is a very swingy game. Because Battletech's fights have low unit size, most Battletech fights are, 4 to 12 units on a side, and 12 units on Classic Battletech is a lot. But in Alpha Strike, you're looking at 6 to 12 probably for a 1 hour game. You're looking at small unit sizes. Any bad luck that kills a unit is majorly crippling. Any unit that dies to random bad dice, which will happen, it's a dice-based game, this is a thing. Any unit that dies early or unexpectedly is a major impact. When you only have 6 mechs to work with and you lose 2 of them on round 1 to bad dice, you're crippled. It's bad. You are in trouble. You are in trouble, and your force is extremely limited now because you lost a third of your combat force. That's not a good thing. Because Battletech has so small unit sizes, each loss matters, and because the Battletech luck is the way Battletech luck is, and because luck is such a big factor in the game and the way the game resolves things, you can lose through no fault of your own. Your skill didn't matter. You can't roll the dice better. That's not okay, you can, but that's called cheating. But, if you're rolling dice fairly, you have no control over what the dice say, and what are you going to do? Not roll bad numbers? That's not an option, unless you're cheating, again. Controlling dice rolls is called cheating. We don't do that. What are you going to do? This is not a good thing. This means that player skill, while player skill does matter, and better players can and will usually beat worse players, sometimes player skill just isn't that important, because the game just decides you lose. And that's a bad tournament. That's bad for tournaments. The way you can counter this in a tournament game, for the record, is by having bigger force sizes. In 40k, you're going to have 20 or 30 units or something. You're going to have big squads of guys. So, you're playing the Imperial Guard. You've got a squad of 15 or 20 guardsmen plus some vehicles. You've got a big unit size and you can absorb some losses. But in Battletech, you've got 4 units. You've got a lance of mechs, right? You lose 1 unit, you're now down a lot of your firepower. It's a very swingy game, and this is not a good thing. Additionally, because Battletech is unbalanced, you can lose during force creation, like we talked about earlier. You can just bring a bad force and not realize that you brought a bad force a new player to the game can bring something and not realizing what it is. If a new player shows up with MRMs because they looked at a MRM 40 and go, wow, that's 40 damage. That's really good. 40 damage is a lot. And then they show up and they're like, oh wait, why are the range brackets terrible? Oh, why do I have a hit penalty? Oh, these are bad. And they can lose because they didn't realize what the tech was. They looked at one thing and they didn't have enough of a knowledge to realize, hey, wait, this is a trap. This is a trap choice. And that's a problem too. Because of this, Battletech for this ranking gets a D. Please see me after class. Player skill matters, but it's not the key determinant. It's just a determinant. And I don't like that. I don't think that's good for tournament play. And finally, the last point to grade Battletech on is force construction. Force construction tools. Battletech gets a failing grade here too. In order to build a BV balanced force, which is battle value for the record, it's a mechanic used to balance pickup games. For assigning battle value, you need to use the master unit list, which is an official source. The master unit list has no mechanical data. It just has battle value and who fields what. So in order to find units, you probably are going to use Sarna. Sarna.net is a fan-run wiki. It's not official. And it also is incomplete because it's fan-run. And it also contains no rule information. So to get rule information, you have to use a third-party program like Solaris Skunkworks or Mega Mech Lab to print record sheets. Except that you also need to find record sheets if you're using some things that they can't print, because they can't print, there's a lot of things they can't print. So if you're trying to use Blackwater Navy or a lot of aerospace or any infantry units except for maybe battle armor, and I think battle armor you still need to get elsewhere, you need to use a record sheet book, which you have to buy. And you probably don't know what's in the record sheet book unless you look it up. And Sarna doesn't always tell you what's in record sheet books, so you just kind of have to guess. And finding what record sheet book has what thing in it is really annoying and really hard. And if you're paying attention, we're up to like 3 or 4 different sources, half of which aren't even official, and may or may not be updated. Solaris Skunkworks doesn't have every mech in it. There's some problems here. Anyone who's ever built a competitive list in a game is looking at this going, oh god, this is awful sounding. If you've ever tried to build a BV list, this is bad. And this assumes you even know what units you're looking for, because the master unit list makes no distinction between a faction building something locally and making it a part of their identity versus they salvaged this once in battle. So if you go to like the Civil War era and you look at the House Davion, the Federated Sons force list, like master unit list, the 16 Invasion Clan Omnis are on there as House Davion legal units, despite them not producing it and only salvaging a handful from the Clan Invasion. So, you could look at that list and not knowing any better go, oh, they have the Timberwolf? I'll just take a Timberwolf. Even though the Timberwolf is not a Davion mech, and it makes no fucking sense to be on that list. But it's there, because the master unit list makes no distinctions, and unless you already knew that, and there is no way you could know that without being an enfranchised player, you see the problem here? There's no way of knowing this, and you're talking about being enfranchised and already knowing how to manipulate the tools to get the results you need. It's a mess. Building force lists is a mess. It's just a nightmare. And this isn't a thing you can have for a competitive game. Competitive games need to be easy and have low barriers of access. And Battletech just doesn't have that. And because of this, Battletech gets a D on this too. It's possible to build a list, but it's too much work for a competitive game, and it's asking too much of players. And so our final conclusion. So Battletech had 5 categories. It gets 1A, 1 B-, 2 Ds, and a stone cold F. If that was your report card at college, I am sorry for the waste of money you spent at college. This is a failing report card. This is not good. This is not okay. I love Battletech more than most people, but I also am willing to realize what Battletech is and what it isn't. What Battletech is a simulationist historical war game with a focus on scenario play. What it's not is a competitive skirmish game with a focus on PvP tournament victory. And that's just kind of how it is. If you look at Battletech objectively, that's the result you come to. Because that's what Battletech is. It's what it's always been. Now, Battletech can do a lot of things. but Battletech probably shouldn't do this thing. Because it's not built for it, it's not good for it, it doesn't have the tools for it, and it doesn't have the balance for it. And I think that's fine. I've seen a lot of lists floating around right now of tournament rules. I'm not going to name names of who made the list. I'm not even sure who the original organization is, but there's some tournament lists running around right now, some tournament rules, and I looked at them and they're missing the point. The point of Battletech is that it's not a tournament game. It's a scenario game. And the whole game was built with this in mind. My suggestion to anyone who wants to play Battletech competitively is don't. Play Battletech the way it was meant to be played. Scenario game with a GM managing the game. Don't make it into something it's not. You're forcing a square peg into a round hole, and it doesn't make any sense. Battletech is good for some things, and it's bad for other things. If you want to play a competitive tournament game, go play 40K. And that's not a slur, for the record. 40K is a fine game, but it's built for that. Go play a game that is designed to do what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a good thing. It's good for games to have specialties, and it's good for games to be good at things and to be bad at things. And that's fine. That's what I'm going to leave you with. Use games the way they were meant to be used. And don't try to force them to be something that they're not. And with that, we come to the conclusion of today's episodes. Tune in again next time while I explain why the Urban Mech is the worst mech ever designed and why we should all play with nothing but the Clint. Not really. But maybe. But not really. That's actually all I've got. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave me that comment about why I'm completely correct or absolutely terrible, and maybe check out the Patreon, which is linked below, if you're feeling like I deserve $1. I've been Bloody Doves, this has been Radio Free Butte Hold, and until next time, remember, Mech Warriors, live free, ride hard, and never trust Comstar.